issues.
That works. I'm going with that. Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to the Sun Dragon Sideshow.
The Dear Becky and Lizzy edition.
Okay, I'm gonna sit down. Okay. Hi. Oh yeah, I'm always wonky about where the camera is, and
It was funny this morning.
well, that was more where I'm having things going on this morning. So let's put this over there. So, hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm the owner of Sun Dragon Art Fiber in not so chilly and going to get warmer today, Brevard, North Carolina.
I'm Liz. I'm the minion there.
It's warm enough the Bracken Mountain Breakfast Club is, some of them are sitting outside. And that means it's warmer than it has been. So, and all the yarns we've been playing with up in front here. I gotta put all those away. So, hi! How's everybody doing today? I feel like it's at an angle, but I'm not gonna worry about it. It wasn't when I fixed it before.
It's okay. People can just sit at an angle when they watch
I'll sit
us.
down. I'll hunker down so it's not like, ta-da! Then I feel like so much. I'm only a little taller than you, but I feel so much taller right now. So
It's okay.
but I sit back. Okay. So, hi. We should talk about yarn today. Do we want to do...
I'm going to let you read the card because I have 2 emails, but the card came in before the emails.
Yeah, and the card is mostly saying hi to you, but that's okay. But there's other stuff in it.
There's other stuff in it.
So, the card writer, it's a very pretty card, is wishing Liz a happy birthday in a dark and broody way, because she likes the dark and broody. So, yeah, that's awesome. Okay, my question is, how can I keep my hems or edges from rolling, specifically hems or cuffs on sweaters? Even ribbing seems to roll. Does it matter how deep the hem cuff /cuff is? What causes this? Thanks for all you do, all rolled up. I love it when people are like, let's make up a fun name like with Dear Abby and stuff. So,
I'm going to just put something out there and then you can dig into the minutia of it. Because, everything that's stockinette rolls, because that's the nature of stockinette.
And for our new listeners who might be new to knitting, what is stockinette?
Stockinette is where all the V's are on one side. So
She's learned my lingo.
V's and turtlenecks are just the easiest way to...
V's are knit stitches, turtlenecks. Like think of your, here's how I do it. Think of your neck as the stitches that are sitting on the needle. This is a stitch. V-neck or turtleneck. Knit stitch, purl stitch. Continue.
Yeah. Anyway, when all the V-necks are on one side, facing one side, it's stockinette. So in flat knitting, it would be knit a row, purl a row. In the round, it's knit every row or purl every row, depending on what you're doing. It depends on how much fun you enjoy purling. But
and when all the turtlenecks show on one side, the outside, then it's reverse stockinette. Yes. Because it still is doing that. It's very flat, right? Yes. Yeah. So continue.
Turtleneck. V-necks, when they're all on one side, they like to curl. If it's a scarf, they all go whoop. If it's a sweater, they all go whoop.
If it's a scarf, it'll go whoop on this edge and whoop on this edge.
It's just...
I don't know if I have an example.
When you're doing a hat, like there's the rolled brim on a hat, that it's you just do stockinette and it goes whoop, and it's kind of the nature of the beast.
Yes, well, and her question is this person's question is, even ribbing seems to roll.
It depends, like... I found it depends on your body shape, on like...
It can totally depend on the length.
The length, like most of mine, if you notice, they kind of go bloop, just where they sit on me.
That's a perfect example. You go, you continue, you finish.
Sometimes, I told Carol, like with my Steinkrieger sweater, I did purl 1, knit 3, purl 1, and I did a block of it, and then I did my seed stitch bottom, and I did the same thing on my brown sweater, and the thicker the block of where I staggered the pearls into, a wider thing, it doesn't seem to want to roll up as much. But my brown sweater, I didn't do a big enough block of them. I was just like, oh, that'll work. And it went,
I'm sure there is some kind of formula to some extent. Again, fibers will change what happens with this. Gauge might change how well this works. I'm sure there is some kind of formula of how much you need on the edges or the bottom to compensate. Like if you have a long piece, with blocking, that's another thing. Blocking could help this issue. But you do need ribbing still. You need some kind of edging that's not stockinette to combat this. And what the letter writer is saying is, even with some like ribbing, seed stitch, something else, garter, it's not always working. And that could be, if you have a really long piece or a really wide piece, that's going to overtake a little bit of edging. This I was like, I don't have a sample. This is my unfinished, but it has all the edging the way it would be done. Confetti scarf from Pearl Soho, and it's just knit a row, purl a row. And you can see, like, it's right up to the edge and bound off, and it curls. And the other thing with this backside, this is the backside, but it's curling up on that. And that's because there is no, like, textured stitch work to stop that from happening. That's why when, like, for new knitters, I'm like, if you just make a scarf where you knit every row, it's going to lie flat. It may not look like what you think knitting should look like, but it's going to be reversible, lie flat, all that good stuff. Often for a scarf, there will either be ribbing or garter on the edges. Garter is knitting every row. And so, like, on the back side, you'll knit across the front, totally. On the back side, you'll knit maybe 5 stitches and then purl across and knit the other 5 stitches. Now, with something this wide and this heavy, if I only did 5 stitches of ribbing on the wrong side, on each side, it might still curl. It very well. Like, baby blankets, you might need to do 10 or more stitches, and then it becomes a juggling act of the hardship of how much, like, if the border's really super thick, you may not like the look, but it'll keep it from curling. Potentially.
This is unscientific on my part, but the one thing that I've done to sweater hems or sweater cuffs that I don't get curling is when I crochet an edge, and I think it's because the weight.
It's the weight. Yeah. That part of that is, like, you have all the weight of the stockinette that wants to curl, and then you put something on the edge that's itty bitty. Like, I have a fingering weight sweater up there that the edging, it only wanted 1 inch of ribbing. And blocking has helped that, but it still wants to flip up. Because it's only it's only a little bit. This is not magical and powerful enough to overpower everything else that's happening in the sweater. But sometimes even doing a lot of ribbing won't necessarily fix it. It still would want to flip. And it's the borderline between one and the other. I think what Liz is addressing is something heavier. So sometimes an I-cord bind off, which is small, is enough to keep something from flipping up because there's more bulk there. But sometimes that's not even enough.
I've done because of my short sweaters, I did an I-cord bind off on one of my sweaters, and it wants to just
still wants to flip up.
Yeah.
Like the sweater I'm wearing, I have, see this ribbing here? It's wanting to pucker. And part of that's because I haven't blocked it. I'm hoping that when I block it, it will settle. Part of that, like Liz was saying, like where we sit, like this is right where I sit. So where I sit, this kind of folds up. And then when I stand up, it doesn't want to relax again. Again, blocking might help that. Might. But it's not a fail-safe. It's also, I want to say the ribbing down here was only a couple inches. The cuff ribbing, it wanted to be 3 inches. Longer ribbing can potentially compensate for that. But it might not. And you also might not like the look of longer ribbing. You might think it looks silly on the sweater you're trying to make. I'm looking up at my Lara pullover, which is just fuzzy as all get out. Like, I finished that during February, and it has just about an inch or so, although it's bulky yarn, just a few rows of garter on it, and it mostly keeps it hanging low. I think when I wear it, though, again, because it hits where, like, it hits, my legs are pushing up on my sweater when I'm sitting down, it's going to want to encourage it to flip back up, and whether or not it's going to stay hanging. Like, some yarns have much better drape than others when you knit with them. And so some of them are going to want to hang when you stand back up, and some of them are going to want to stay all folded up. And so that's a tough one. It definitely, edging and bottom, you need something that is big enough, aka heavy enough, and that could be width of stitches, or that could be crochet or a thicker stitch that's going to pull more to keep things from riding up.
One of the sweaters that one of our customers came in with, the collar and the hem and the cuffs were all double knit, like just like that much. And it was the coolest thing, because like when you saw the inside of her hem, she had it was done in a different color, but that could also be heavy enough to, if you. And it's one of those, it depends on the pattern. It, depends on your proficiency with double knitting. But
and, well, so that's like, just kind of riffing off of that. If you did a longer cuff and then folded it and sewed it in, there's a way that you can do, like, a line of purling, or if you're knitting flat, knitting on the back side can create an edge if you wanted to come down with your cuff and go back up again and sew it. Anything with double knit or with a folded hem, that kind of thing, where you're sewing it in, it will add weight. It will also add bulk. Yep. So it may not lie as flat. It might look a little poofy down there. So it's something to consider if you're trying that. I mean, that's another reason, even though it's not double knit, it's another reason that oftentimes a pattern will tell you to go down a needle size or two to do ribbing. Ribbing is a fluffier, textured knitting tends to be fluffier and bigger looking than stockinette. And so to compensate for that, to not make it look like you've got a nice sweater and then ribbing, they'll have you go down a few needle sizes to not have it. It doesn't necessarily make sense, because, like, to the brain sometimes, because knit one, purl one, the purls recede a little. You get texture going this way, so why would it feel bigger? But it does. It's a funky phenomenon. So, but that's the best answer I could give to that one. Those are some thoughts.
Yeah.
Some kind of texture on the edges, if we're talking about side edging. But again, if you have a huge long blanket that's like this wide across, and then you have an edge on it that's this wide across, the overall, it's like a wave in the ocean. The overall, like, width of your blanket, the stockinette is still going to want to try to curl like this, and then your piece on the edge might just give in to the curl and flip.
And you did a scarf, the splash, the Lang splash, that had just a little border,
just a little bit,
and
it still looks more like a tube when you hold it up.
Yeah,
because it all curls in.
And you blocked it and everything.
I think I did. I don't even know, but anymore. Discontinued yarn, so I don't even know anymore. But yeah, sometimes there's just like, and blocking can help, like blocking a baby blanket or something. But with use and wear, the blanket may still decide it wants to do this. It's not going to be like, well, I've been blocked once, so I'm always going to stay in this shape. We had a knitter once who, it was a texture. It wasn't an edging like that, but there was a leafy texture on the edge of a shawl she was going to wear as a scarf, and she got it blocked. We had these nice little points, and then she wore it, and she's like, now it's floppy again. What do I do? And I'm like, apart from starching it where it's going to scratch your neck, there's not much to do. Like, if you want something with nice drape, but then want the stitch work to always be on edges, not in the center where it could still pull open and things, it's not going to have nice points all the time, because it's like wanting inexpensive but soft but doesn't pill yarn. Like the Venn diagram of that, there's a black hole in the center.
Yeah,
there's not really. It doesn't exist.
String is going to behave as string,
especially floppy.
Yes,
string. Anyway,
our next question.
Oh, I didn't get anything ready for some of these other questions, but here I see some stuff for.
Okay,
I don't know which one you're going to next.
The Patagonia.
Okay, let me get as you read.
Okay, dear Becky and Lizzy, I am currently working with Patagonia, and it tends to break, especially if I have to tink. I'm concerned about the wear, but more importantly, will it allow somewhat aggressive blocking, such as for a lace shawl? How will it do over time? Worried knitter.
Okay, so Patagonia, we have quite a few yarns in our shop. They are luxury yarns, or like not like super expensive, but decently expensive. That will, if you pull on it, so this is Patagonia. It's a softer spun yarn. And if I pull on this hard enough, it will easily break. There are other yarns that it will take a little bit of tugging, but I can still, like, have you ever seen a pattern where it's like, break yarn? And you're like, what? Like, long time ago, I would be like, so I will cut the yarn, I'll use my scissors, and then there's 90% of the yarns in the shop. If we yank on them hard enough, they will break. Like,
there are a couple you can't do that with.
There are a couple that you actually do have
I've
to use
tried.
scissors because we hurt our hands. But yeah, the Patagonia, one of the ways you can get wool and merino, especially non-superwashed merino, to be soft is the construction of the yarn. And I'm still learning about this whole woolen versus worsted spun. But worsted has a lot more like structural integrity to it, and a lot of the yarns you'll see in everyday shops and big box stores, and a lot of the shops like local yarn stores are worsted spun. A new trend is this woolen spun, where it, like, Liz can address it a little more how it works, but you see these loose couple of plies. When it's this fluffy ply, there's a good chance that it is woolen spun. Can you explain the difference, kinda?
Technically,
Yarn
is semi-worsted.
I don't know what that means.
Worsted...
Hang on. Can you start over with, most yarns are semi-worsted, because I'm going to have to carve part of this out because I said a bad word. Go ahead.
Most yarns are semi-worsted. Worsted, like full worsted, is spun so tight, like thread, like a worsted suit. That's where the term comes from. They did leave a voicemail.
It says in the corner. Okay.
Woolen spun is where the fibers are all kind of jumbled. Like,
so worsted, they're more combed out and longer.
They're all combed out. It depends on the yarn or the sheep as to how long they are, but they're all combed out and longer. And the reason yarn is semi-spun is because it's not spun as tight as thread. Like, worsted suits are very teeny tiny, very tightly spun yarns, whereas our yarn isn't quite spun that tight.
Okay. But I guess it's a general sense. But return, sorry, because I interrupted, to what woolen spun.
Woolen spun, the yarn or the hairs or the fibers don't have to be all
lined up. They're just hodgepodge and then
yeah.
So there's not as much integrity to it. Like,
yeah. But it sounds like because they're all kind of tangled, they might be. But you're going to have weaker spots where some of the tangles, don't get as tangly. But and it's a looser spin.
And the looser spin definitely means it will be softer. Like, we don't know for a fact, but if we had to guess, the Saxony is woolen spun. The Patagonia is woolen spun. The stuff that if you put, like, to some extent, Noro might be considered, like, we don't know.
Noro is probably...
Noro just doesn't have a tight spin on it.
A half-hearted attempt at a semi-worsted without a ply. Like,
because they want to keep it natural.
The more plies you put, the stronger it's going to also, for semi-worsted, also be a little stronger. Noro's kind of like, we lined all the yarn up, and we went, huh.
It's
yarn!
It's not really. Any single ply yarn, probably, like, there's some Malabrigos, we have some in the shop, not very many though. People are like, oh, it's so lovely, but it's got such little spin on it that those will often pull apart. Like just when you're tugging on them more than anything.
Also,
they'll pill a whole lot easier than stuff that is spun like tighter.
Also, looking at the twist on like the Saxony, it's 2 plies that they went, huh. And so it's like 2 very lightly spun plies, and the Patagonia.
It's the same thing, kind of.
There
might be more than 2, but it's 2-ish or so,
3 plies that went,
but not
maybe. So like they're very loosely.
You should get to a couple more things. No, it's fun though. It's really fun. So, and I've had it come apart when knitting. Like if I yank too hard on it. I've had crocheters have spots like that. I lost track of the things I just broke off because I was going to maybe wet felt it back together again. But let me look at... see if I can get this. So, but once it's in a piece, it tends to have a lot more integrity than individually. One of the things we were talking about before we got on camera was... that it's breaking when you're tinking. I have had the Saxony because I pulled on one strand of the 2 strands that part came apart. Like, it really depends on how hard you're yanking with it. So, either when you're tinking or when you're knitting, like if you split strands and then you're trying to pull them back apart, this could happen with any yarn, but it's more likely to happen with a woolen spun yarn, of it coming apart. It doesn't mean the yarn is bad or moth-eaten necessarily, especially if it's a soft yarn like this. What I think is kind of cool about, and I'm actually going to probably stick this in my mouth, which is, spit joining. 100% wool, when you spit join, is where you can get it to kind of felt. So most people, when they spit join at this point, they use a cup of water, but because this sounds gross to some people. I suddenly have a dry mouth because I want to try this. I'm getting both sides wet. This is 2 different colors of Patagonia. I am overlapping them by about like an inch or so. And so it's wet and friction. And I'm going to see if I can get this to work. And sometimes if it's still damp, I got to use more friction till it's almost dry again. But so if it breaks and you tink back out, see, I could do that even more, but I'm tugging on this, and it's not coming apart. Like, if I yank on it, just like when it was together, I feel comfortable knitting again with this and having it be part of my stitches. The stitches themselves add some integrity to your yarn, even with lace work. So, like this sweater, I blocked this without any problem. I did not aggressively block this, but this is all Patagonia. And I blocked this without anything coming apart. We have seen one of our knitters. We have seen she's working with a worsted spun, like a wool, and something's come apart on her collar. So that can happen even with a higher integrity yarn. This is a Patagonia piece, my Euclid shawl, that I bound off, deciding I wasn't going to finish in February. And if I pull on this. Like if I was gonna,
you're aggressively.
I am yanking on this. If I decide to aggressively block this, I don't see it coming apart. This is knit with Patagonia, and it has holes in it. It has bigger holes in it. There aren't necessarily a whole lot of parts where it is just one strand, but still, if I am yanking on this, and it is not coming apart. When I'm knitting, like if I yank this hard on, you saw I yanked with half the force on just a single strand of yarn, and I was like, ta-da, I broke it apart. I've had that happen with this shawl, with this cowl. I got caught under a chair leg, and I pulled, and it snapped apart. And I spit joined it and kept going. Now, again, that won't work with superwash. That won't work with cottons. It's only 100% wool that has enough of those fibers to grab to each other. But I think, like, I am not worried about the structural integrity of this once I have knit with it. Like, I don't even know if you can hear that. I'm like...
I can hear it snap. Not snap, but the...
Not like the yarn breaking, but I'm really pulling on the fabric there. So, just because a yarn comes apart when you're knitting with it. Like Noro, I wouldn't sew pieces together with Noro because the friction is going to keep pulling at it and there's a good chance it's going to break. But my finished Noro pieces, I'm not worried about them falling apart. So there's more integrity to something once you've stitched with it. What do we think about, do we want to, look, what do we got?
We have the last question, and I think we have enough time to briefly answer it. Hi, Liz. My question this week, which you don't have to answer if you don't want to, is about your work experience. Some background on how you know so much. It seems there is nothing you can't do. Your knitting, crocheting is stellar, but there is all the sewing, too. Were these skills acquired in a past job or just as a hobby? Thank you, Sue.
Short answer
is it was all hobby. And then I found my voodoo knitting master and learned lots at, her feet. And in my sewing, I cheat a lot.
I was going to say, for the sewing thing, she did not learn anything from me.
I'm all self-taught in my sewing, and I learned all the cheats. And according to my neighbor, whose mother was a trained seamstress in like the 1920s and 30s, I am the laziest seamstress ever. But
you're not lazier than someone. It's like someone who's a runner is more active than someone sitting on the couch. It's like you're not as lazy as someone who doesn't attempt any sewing. Yeah,
I've learned the cheats to do pleats and not sit there and mark them out and scotch tape and a fork and it's hacks. Did you learn those hacks from other people or online, or you just kind of came up with stuff yourself? I learned to sew pre-internet. There wasn't, you learned to crochet pre-internet. So I got the book. I taught myself to crochet. I learned to crochet from a CD-ROM. But, I mean, I always find people are impressed when like, oh, you didn't learn to knit from your mom? I'm like, no, my mom laughs when people say that. Like, I'm self-taught as well. I didn't learn from generational, what have you, I will say that probably the biggest thing with my knitting and now, kind of figuring out crochet is just learning where the yarn goes. Like, Rebecca's a big fan of learning to fix your mistakes and just figuring out, like, okay, you dropped a stitch. Well, how do stitches work? And learning to pick it back up. And I was talking to Rebecca yesterday about all my top-down, bottom-ups. Well, they were bottom-up sweaters that I did top-down. And I'm like, the only way I've been able to do that is learning how the yarn works, which some Rebecca's told me and some I've kind of figured out on my own. Most of the things from my Fix Your Mistakes class I have figured out myself by just messing with the yarn. I think we were talking about how none of our jobs necessarily prepared us for the crafty side of what we do. They may have prepared us for the human interactions with people and with, like, I feel like every single thing I've done up until this point has helped me run this business. But the other parts of the business, not the crafty part. The crafty part has been like a side hobby that I turned into a business, that we use in our business. For the first at least several years that I worked here, it was listen to Rebecca, parrot it back to people. I BS'd my way through a lot of yarn sales. I love you guys. Thank you. Well, but it's like, it's not like, I mean, I had one job as a side job to my full-time employment of being like Liz in a yarn shop before I opened my own yarn shop. But it's not like you were, you worked in a factory making shirts or you made dresses or So none of my employment history had anything to do with crafty anything. Daycare, school bus aide, mom. I worked in a grocery store for a little bit. I worked at a pizza place for in college, and then I worked counter service at a pizza place and scooped ice cream. I was a teacher for many, many years. Again, I had a side hustle for 3 or 4 years before opening this shop as an employee in a yarn shop on the weekends while I was a teacher.
Like, I have a master's in that I don't use. You know, an undergraduate degree that I did use. Like, both of those I did use teaching, but I don't anymore. Yeah, been a camp counselor. Didn't do any knitting for that. Taught archery for that. That was fun. But my certification...
That could come in handy now.
Well, my certification to teach others ran out in 2003. So, you know, that's 20 years ago. Wow. Okay, anyway. So, before we leave, because I have to go check my voicemail and see if my car is okay or not. Tomorrow, not only are we having virtual sit and stitch in the evening from 7 to 9 p.m. on Zoom, and you get in with the shop phone number.
828-877-3550.
We are having a flash sale tomorrow only because it is Liz's birthday. And we won't say how old she's turning because it doesn't matter. Age is just a number. But we have a birthday discount we give people in the shop, you know, once a year. You can call on your birthday, or you can call another time, and we'll mark in your notes that you've used it this year, but 20% off. And tomorrow, Liz has graciously given her birthday discount to you all. Have fun. Save 20% in the online shop or by coming in or calling us. The code is Minion B Day. All letters squished together. I gotta look at your name tag. MINIONBDAY. Tomorrow, April 14th, right? Yep. That's April 14th, is Friday. For the 24-hour, I don't know. I honestly don't know how our online system works and what time zone they're in. So try not to wait until the last minute if you're on the West Coast, because I don't know. I don't know when this thing stops. So, but tomorrow only. Yay. Please use it. Call the shop if you have questions before you purchase. Like, if you have any issues, let us know instead of going through the purchase and saying later it didn't work. So make sure it's working. Okay. I think that's it. I think we're going to sign off for the day.
Sounds good.
Okay. Have a good weekend, everybody. Enjoy Liz's birthday tomorrow. And we'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.